Hi, welcome to the John Gaunt podcast, and thank you very much indeed for making it so successful. The numbers are growing nicely, and no wonder. The MSM, the mainstream media, and the broadcasters in this country, in league with the law, are in bed with the establishment. We can't talk about Keir Starmer today. I've had my say about that, as you know. So let's talk about something else. Isn't it great to live in a democracy? I never thought when I recorded that podcast last week where I said, people like Philip Schofield, people like top politicians are protected by the establishment media. I never knew it would all come true so fast. But let's draw a veil on that. Are we still allowed to use the word veil? And let's talk about something else, something which I think is frightening, terrifying, scary as hell, and no major politician is really talking about it. Perhaps they're too frit as well. I want to talk about China. I don't think Russia is our major threat. I think China is. And I'll tell you why. Have a listen to this. I've also got a brilliant email which is both praising me and also criticising me for my support of Trump. I'm not sure the lady has understood where I am on that completely. But also she makes some brilliant observations about Israel and Palestine. I'll read the email later and I'll answer Angie's views on that in this podcast as well. This could well be a long one. I'm not quite sure how long, because as you know, I don't script these things. I have a list of keywords that I want to talk about, and then we see where the conversation goes. With all your contributions, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to say that I can now get off the dole. I'm also delighted, because I've got some freelance work as well, I'm also delighted to say please keep contributing. You know where to go. buymeacoffee.com// John Gaunt, and those contributions will make this podcast develop. We've already got plans now to introduce video as well. I shall read out all the names later in the show, but I've got to say a big thank you to David McGeechee, who donated 10 coffees last night, 50 quid. He's got the record at the moment for the most coffees. Don't forget, you can just donate one as long as you contribute, but you're not obligated. So thank you for that. Right, let's get to China if we possibly can. But let's go to Wales first. The Port Talbot steel plant is closing today. Of course, it's owned by Tata, so maybe it's Tata to Tata. The company who also are basically involved with Jaguar, they're closing it down. I've just seen a BBC report where they're saying it's being closed down so we can reduce carbon emission even. There's a surprise. And also, as well, because they don't want to use coal anymore. And so they're closing it down. 2,500 jobs will go. Many of the jobs have gone already. But it just got me thinking, well, what is our industry? Especially when you put that piece of news in with the fact that the last coal plant for electricity, the last coal-fuelled electricity generator, is also closing today after 57 years of being in operation in Nottinghamshire. Now, this rush to green energy or to electricity, I wouldn't mind it if it was more linked in with a rush to nuclear, which of course it isn't. We should have developed our nuclear infrastructure years ago. And again, I'm not making a party political point. I'm blaming all of them. The political, the establishment class. You know the people I'm talking about. The people who are protected by draconian laws which stop the free press from talking. Oh, what could I be talking about? I don't know. So let's talk about that. So this coal plant is closing down. Also, of course, Port Talbot steel closing today. And for the next 3 or 4 years, until they get the new plant going, they're going to import steel. Now, this has echoes to me of the coal strike. Now, I don't blame Maggie Thatcher and I don't blame Arthur Scargill. There was blame on both sides for the miners' strike and the disastrous consequences it had for this country. And I guess I talked about ending tribalism in politics And I'm making that plea at the beginning of this podcast. So I'm talking about the whole political class. Over the weekend when I did my podcast about Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer taking all these freebies, lots of people saying, what about Boris? What about this? What about that? As if by criticising Keir Starmer and Labour, I was supporting Boris. Well, if you've listened to me recently, you'll know that's not the case. I hate all of them. I'd like to throw the biggest bucket of you-know-what over all politicians. So I'm not supporting Boris, I'm certainly not supporting Sunak, and I'm not supporting the previous Conservative administration. I did at times, but I think I've grown up, and I've now realised that tribalism will get us nowhere. So there's people over the weekend arguing like mad with me. Well, I just basically ignored them or called them a silly boy, but they're going mad, saying Conservatives were worse. Well, they may well have been, but it's kind of irrelevant. I don't think Keir Starmer should be getting free suits or free housing. That's about all I can say on that at the moment, but that's where I am. But that's not me saying everything that Labour want to do is wrong or bad. I think it is disgraceful what they've done about the student grants. They've attacked the old by taking the winter fuel allowance off 10 or 11 million of them. People will die because of that decision, Smarmer. And also, of course, now they're going to attack students. After promising student fees, student loans, etc., would come down, they're going up. It's going to come out in the budget. I see as well in the budget, there's now a rumour in today's Daily Telegraph, they're going to spend another 20 billion pounds over spent already, HS2. Now they are going to bring it to Euston, because remember there was this farce that it wasn't going to end at Euston, it was going to end at somewhere like Burnt Oak. Something may as well be Selly Oak for all its use. It's going from Birmingham to there. They're now going to do the Euston extension. Why? Why pour more money into that money pit? I say scrap HS2 now. In fact, I made a podcast about it a few weeks ago. It should have been scrapped ages ago. What a waste of money. And again, that's not a go at Starmer. It's not even a go at Sunak, because he basically cancelled the northern extension. It's a go at all of the politicians. They are so out of contact with us, the people of this country, and so are the mainstream media. I'm going to get on to China again in a minute. I've just gone off on one here. You know the mainstream media, you know these people who appear on telly in their nice suits talking about politics. They're all talking heads. They're all over the place at the moment because it's conference season. These people could be on QVC next week selling products. They're not giving you their views, their opinions, and if they are, they're lefty biased ones, aren't they? Look at the BBC, they've even had to admit their treatment of Israel has been institutionally biased just recently. But they just parrot whatever their bosses say, and they're all petrified of getting the sack. Same with talk jocks. There isn't a decent talk jock left in this country. Nick Ferrari's not bad, but most of them are just in the pockets of their bosses. You would say that, Gaunty, because you got the sack for calling somebody a Nazi. Yes, I did. And also an ignorant pig. But let me tell you, I'm still proud of what I said. I stood up for kids in care. You wouldn't get that on any form of talk, radio or TV now. They may as well be selling products on QVC. They're all false. False, false, false. So, the steel plant closes today. The coal mines are closed. Let's go back to what I was saying about Scargill versus Thatcher. I actually stood on a picket line in Kersley on the outskirts of Coventry during that strike. I actually thought the miners were being hard done to. I then met a lot of the so-called scab miners in the UDM, Union of Democratic Miners from Nottinghamshire. I filmed just after I left university. I filmed a TV programme. My bit, I was there for a week. Just got drunk on Lafroig whiskey with that great actor, Paul. He was in Yesterday's Dream, I think. It was called Yesterday's Dream. And an RSC actor called Malcolm Story. These people were my heroes. And here I was sitting, it was in Buxton, where we filmed this series. and we stayed at the Buxton Spa Hotel. And at that point, the UDM, the Union of Democratic Miners, they were having their conference there. And as I say, a lot of miners thought they were all scabs. So it was interesting meeting them and hearing their side of the argument. But as you know, in the end, Thatcher had stockpiled the coal. And her argument was it was cheaper to bring coal in from Australia than mine all the coal we still had in this country. Scargill, refusing to have that second ballot, effed everything up, didn't he? Had those awful scenes where working class people were pitted, pardon the pun, against each other, Orgrave, the battles of the police and the miners. Terrible, terrible poverty they went through. My friend Mick, who I went to school with, he was in the sixth form with me. He wanted to be a lumberjack. There wasn't much call for that in Coventry, so he became a miner. He was the campest miner you've ever seen, but what a nice bloke. He was on the dole, I think, not on the dole, sorry, he was on the picket line for the best part of 18 months, lost everything. My stepbrother was in the police. He earned so much money on overtime, I'm not criticising him, somebody had to do it, that I put down the deposit for his first ever house. And he did well out of it. But it pitted working class men and women against each other. It was a terrible time for this country. And of course she had the upper hand because they'd already done it once, had a strike once, and she'd stockpiled it. So there was no way she was going to lose. She starved them back into work. And then, of course, Mrs. Thatcher made the point, we can buy it from Australia and import it. And did you know there is so much coal under the ground in this country? Let's fast forward to where we are now. Coal, of course, is the devil. It's evil. We've got to get rid of our emissions. Apart from, no one seems to consider there's all this black gold under there. But we're now talking about closing down our last coal plant. And when we're talking about closing down our steel plants, because we want green energy. We're believing that idiot Miliband, right, who looks like Bernie Winters out of Mike and Bernie Winters. In fact, Schnubbits the dog would have a better economic policy than that buffoon. He's in charge, the man who couldn't even eat a bacon sandwich. Do you remember when he was leader of Labour? We're now listening to him, and they've got these ridiculous targets. 2030 will all be electric. No, we flipping well won't. There's no chance on earth. Electric cars, I went in a brilliant one the other day. It was an Audi, top of the range. Mate of mine, it was his mate's. It was a fabulous car. God, was it fast. Was it luxurious? It was beautiful. Even though it was an Audi, it was beautiful, right? But it's not going to catch on, is it? Because you're not going to spend 80 or 90 grand on a car and then sit in it on your leather seats with your air conditioning on, crapping yourself that it's going to run out of charge. The infrastructure's just not there. Just like the infrastructure to fuel that steel plant is not there yet. So let's keep using coal. And here's a novel idea. Why don't we use the coal that's under our green and pleasant land? Because I'll tell you what, China is still opening coal-fuelled plants, steel plants, as we speak. Also power plants. They're not closing down coal-fuelled plants to replace them with nuclear at the moment. They're keeping the coal ones open. They're developing new ones. Don't believe me? Well, have you seen this thing about the railway? It's been all over the news and in the newspapers. It's an incredible piece of engineering. It runs. It used to be known as the Mengula Railway. Right? It goes from West Inner Mongolia into central China. Do you know how long it is? It's 1,127 miles long. You might have seen the pictures on the news or on the internet or in the newspapers. It's incredible. It has these viaducts that go over all these lakes. It goes on for miles, over 1,000 miles. It's not a passenger railway. Let me just have a sip of water. Sorry about this. It's been built just to bring coal from Mongolia right through China to where they need it in their industrial centres. And then we worry They bring 200 million tonnes a year. I was reading another article as well on the internet where this railway, they're now getting it so they don't even need drivers. The trains are going to be automated. They're bringing in all this coal to fuel their industrial growth, yeah? To fuel their plants, to fuel their electricity. Meanwhile, we in the West, well, let's just talk about Britain, we're closing down. Or we've closed down our pits. And when we close down the pits, look at the economic deprivation that happened as a result of it. Go to one of those mining towns. Everyone's strung out on smack or crack or coke. You took away the dignity of work, Mrs. Thatcher. I admire a lot of what Thatcher did. I think the property-owning democracy, even though I don't own a house now, was a good thing for the working class. The problem with it, of course, is people were allowed to buy their council houses and their council flats, but Thatcher and the Tories who came after her didn't bother putting those profits back in to building more stock. But what a ridiculous situation that we're importing coal. And it's from China. And let's go further. And from Australia. Let's go further. China, you know, when we were kids, you'd say, oh, where was that made? China or Hong Kong? And you go, be crap, right? And everything was crap. Everything was plazzy and rubbish and useless. Not now, though. If you get something from China, it's at the top of engineering, isn't it? They've really invested in it. So, for example, you get your iPhone and it's fantastic and it's made in China, and then you see these awful stories about the people having to sleep on the floor in dormitories. And have you seen that one? I don't know if it was Apple, but it's one of the big phone manufacturers. They've had to put nets around these buildings, these multi-storey buildings, because the workers were working so hard and were so stressed, and they were almost slave labour, even if they weren't slave labour. As I say, I'm not necessarily saying this is Apple. They had to put nets around the building because people were trying to commit suicide. But you've got your iPhone. Oh, it's great to get on Twitter, isn't it? It's great to call somebody a right-wing idiot, yeah? Or look at pornography. But that's what's happened. And then it's not just the phones, is it, that we let them manufacture? And I've been thinking about this in terms of, have you been watching that BBC TV series, Night Sleeper? It was meant to be a fantastic new 5-part series. I watched 3 parts on the bounce because I had a friend who was involved, well, 2 friends were involved in it on the production side. And I quite enjoyed it at first. But after 3 episodes, it kind of just got a bit on my nerves. It was a bit too far-fetched. But the basic premise of that story is now coming true. I don't know if you've seen it. It was on the BBC. It's still on the iPlayer. The basic idea was it was a hijack of a train. Although they called it a high hack, get it? Because it's the internet. So instead of the old days, somebody jumping on a train, giving the driver a couple over the head and basically nicking everything on it, or doing what the great train robbers did, this was all done via the computer. They hacked into it. And they hacked into Euston and all the train stations so they could put up different signs. And I thought at first, this is all too far-fetched. This would never happen. And then, did you see what the Israelis have just done? I mean, I thought it was great. What they actually did against Hezbollah, yeah? Message for you! Oh dear. Blown your fingers off, blown your bollocks off. Oh dear, never mind. Targeted fight back by the Israelis. I applaud them. I think it was right. Because Hezbollah, like Hamas, they're terrorist organisations, I'm sorry. And Israel is the only democratically... the only country in the region that is democratic, because Hamas aren't. I know there's an argument about Palestine as a separate issue, but Hamas, who have controlled Palestine for the last 14 years, they're not giving people the votes. You're not telling me Hezbollah are suddenly going to go, oh, I've lost my ghoulies, now we'll have democracy. No. And so the Israelis have played a blinder by planting something in those pages. So then I was thinking about that in connection to Night Sleeper. So if that was possible, and there was even stories in the paper, how safe is your phone? Could they have already planted things in your phone? And I don't want to be too conspiratorial here, but you know when you suddenly get adverts on your phone, you haven't even been speaking on the phone to anyone, But you've been talking about, I don't know, do you fancy going to Thailand, or do you fancy doing this, or have you ever tried that? And the next thing you know, you're getting adverts for Thailand. I remember that story about John Prescott. He got annoyed because he said, I don't understand. I think it was John Prescott. He said, I don't understand why we keep getting these adverts. I keep getting them for Thai prostitutes or something. And somebody said, well, Mr. Prescott, if it was Mr. Prescott, if it's not him, I do apologise. It's because it looks at your Google history and gives you adverts that they think you might want to see. I'm sure that's not a true tale, but you know where I'm coming from. But now it's worse. You only have to mention something, even when you haven't. It seems to me, and tell me if it's wrong, your phone doesn't even have to be on. It's like you've got a spy in your pocket. You with me? I mean, I know sometimes as you walk into certain shops or shopping centres, you hear it bleep, and I think that's them planting something so they can then target you afterwards. And I can see where it comes from with Google. You Google something, and then they know that you might be interested. I mean, we've all had this with holidays. You know, when you go on a cheap airline site and you look at a particular journey, and then you leave it, and then you come back later, the price has gone up. I hate this. I think it's wrong. I think it's I think it's crooked. I think it's corrupt. But when it's giving you adverts or giving you ideas that you haven't even asked for, you've just been having a casual conversation about, I don't think that's right. So if they can do that with your phone, why can't they do something else? It's like a car with sat nav and with central locking. I had a Jag. I had a top-of-the-range Jag a few years ago, which, as you know, I used to be sponsored by them. But I had a top-of-the-range Jag, and it was fantastic. But why do you think more cars are getting nicked like Land Rovers? Because they clone the keys. They can clone the key through your front door. They're now telling you put your car key in the fridge. Who's going to do that when you come in? You just want to toss it onto the table next to your plate glass table. Tasty. Next to where you used to put the phone, your push button phone in the 70s. Are you with me? Yeah? Who has a landline? Why we don't bother with landlines, do we? Anyway, I'm digressing. My mate had a top of the range Range Rover, 95, £100,000. The only way to protect that car from getting nicked was to put the old fashioned steering lock, those yellow ones, that my dad had when he had a black Ford Capri with furry dice. Yeah, one side it said Pete, which is his name. On the other side, after my mum died, it said anyone, ? Right? You know the kind of car I'm talking about. On a Capri, you're now having to put it on a top-of-the-range Range Rover. They're the most nicked car, aren't they? How? Why? If if all these technical advances are so good that a crook can nick it that easy. So then I was thinking, well, where are all these things manufactured? China. Aren't they? It's like your sat-nav. Going back to that Night Sleeper programme, what if suddenly sat-nav didn't work? What if suddenly none of your phones worked, so you couldn't Google? You couldn't be on the train and phone and say, I'm on the train. I hate that when annoying pricks do that. I'm on the train, I'll be home at the normal time. What's the point of phoning? But that's what they do, yeah? What would kids do when they're walking down streets if they couldn't use their thumb and be messaging at the same time and walking into you? They wouldn't know what to do with their hands, would they? I'm joking, but could you imagine if overnight everything crashed? How would you get your Deliveroo? That's another thing I don't understand. Why are people so flipping lazy? They have to get... I was in the fish and chip shop the other night, and there was people doing fish and chip orders. And there's these guys coming in, yeah? They all look like immigrants to me, yeah? Coming in, hardly speaking English, picking up the order, and then cycling away. Well, they're not cycling away. They've got supercharged bikes, haven't they? Electric bikes, which seem to be faster than Barry Sheen's motorbike. And again, they're meant to be against the law. No one's clamping down on it. Because we all want our fish and chips. We want our So I saw somebody getting McDonald's delivered. Why would you want to get McDonald's delivered, even if it was on a supercharged push bike by some immigrant who's probably working in the black economy? Why would you want that and pay extra for it? Because it won't be warm. It can't possibly stay warm that long, can it? Oh, we'll put it in the microwave. Where's the microwave built? China or the Far East? Oh, that's all right then. We'll order another one. Well, yeah, you can do that on the app. Where's the app control? Do you see where I'm coming from here? Why don't people get off their arses? In fact, don't bother going to the chip shop or McDonald's. Why don't you cook something? This is one of the reasons why I'm supporting Trump, which I'll go on to later, because Angie, this lady who sent me this very, very clever email, one of the things she says, I don't know how you can support Trump, and she talks about the pussy grabbing and the rest of it, which I'll talk about in a minute. But one of the reasons is, I think Robert Kennedy, who was brought on board for his team, and I love J.D. Vance, I read his book years ago, I think he's the genuine working class hero, made it through, but let's leave him to one side. But Kennedy, the stuff he's saying about getting America healthy again, is the kind of stuff I used to be saying on Simple as Fat, right? As you know, I believe in low carb. I believe that the cancer-given ingredient is not meat and all the bullshit they come out with there, and let's have a vegan lifestyle. They've just proved that vegan is ultra-processed food. What's killing us is ultra-processed food. It is the ketchup. It is the mass-produced bun, etc., etc. All those ingredients on the back of food that your immigrant delivers from Deliveroo and is cold when it arrives with you, yeah? On the back of your, I don't know, your Dolmeo pizza or your Pizza Hut pizza, or maybe you've gone up market, I don't know, whatever, right? It's that what's killing us. That's giving us the cancer. And sugar is the thing that's giving us cancer. So what I like about Kennedy, he's obviously got the ear of Trump. And I think that's got to be a great thing, not just for America, but for the whole world. Big food, just like Big Pharma, PH, have got too much control. So I like the idea that the Americans might start to attack that. I love that idea, in fact. I really do. So that's another reason why I'm going to support Trump over the laughing hyena. I can't bear her. She hasn't got a policy. You could write her policies down on the back of a postage stamp. If you still use post, because you don't need post, you can use your computer, use email. Where do they all get built? Your computers. China. Why can't they put a chip in? You know, I think I told you this before. When I bought my big house in Northamptonshire, when I was making big money, right? Bought this huge house. I bought 3 DVD players. Yeah, I know. I was an idiot. I was an absolute prat. No wonder I ended up with no money. I bought 3, but I bought them on the same day. Let me tell you what happened with those things. After 2 years, when the inbuilt warranties, I never buy the extra warranty because I always think that's a complete and utter rip-off. After 2 years or 3 years, whatever it was, they all broke down within a week of each other. If that's not built-in obsolescence in the chip, then I'm a Dutchman. God, these clogs are hurting me today. But honestly, have you had that yourself? You buy something, you normally get a letter a few months before the automatic guarantee runs out saying, why don't you protect your goods? You get this all the time with Apple products. Why don't you get Apple Care or whatever it's called? And I was thinking, no, I won't. But if you did, and if you don't, then what happens? A few weeks later, it appears, not just Apple, but I'll use that as a generic term, the product breaks down. And as I say, with these DVDs, I think all 3 of them, I might be misquoting this, it might be 2 out of the 3 broke down. What did I do? Took them to the dump and put them by the side of the skip and bought new ones, because they were only like 150 quid or whatever by then. Money was no object. It was just nonsense. We don't repair anything, although I've noticed recently around here, and I've noticed it in other places on Facebook, they've started these repair shops, haven't they, where people use their own skills to help other members of the community. But I've lost count of the amount of TVs and electrical equipment I've thrown away just because it's not working anymore and I can't be bothered to fix it or get it fixed. I used to know a great guy. He was the flyman at the Belgrade Theatre. His name was John Venn. When Lisa and I first got together, we were talking about him, reminiscing about him. He's a lovely bloke. But he was John the TV man. He used to fix your tellies. He had a rental business. Do you remember when you could rent tellies? When we first got together, we rented a telly off him. Then I bought a second-hand reconditioned one. It was great. It even had, you could turn it over from your seat. Yeah, I had a big long fishing rod and I used to push it and push the switches in. Do you remember when switches, you had to really push them in hard and the whole telly used to shake? I always remember I bought this fantastic, I've just been writing about it in my new book, my thriller, right? He's got this music system like I had, right? It was a Pioneer one, I think it was. You know what I mean? It had a smoked glass top. It was one of those ones that was really long, looked like a super tanker. Wasn't separate, and it had like a record player there. It had the cassette. It didn't have a CD. It was before CDs. It had something else as well. Radio, all built in. Smoked glass top. I bought it when I was a student. Cost me £105. I'd been working in a social club to earn the money. I bought it and it was my pride and joy. And when I lived in a shitty little flat in Moseley in Birmingham, right, this flat was so terrible, we had condensation and ice on the inside of the windows. We didn't have a front door because there'd been a party. You used to have to climb up these wooden steps. It was next to the abattoir. Used to these wooden steps like something out of Oliver Twist or Charles did, and that musical Oliver Twist, yeah? You'd imagine Fagin and the boys sitting on these steps. You walk up the steps and then there's the front door, but somebody had kicked the front door in. So we never got it fixed. I lived there for about 18 months. We never had a front door. That's how grotty this flat was. Oh, but it was happy times. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But I bought this Pioneer music system. And then when Lisa and I got together after I graduated and ended up back in Coventry, what was I doing? I set up my little theatre company, TikTok, didn't I? So I was doing that, but we had that. And that had big clunky buttons. Do you remember the big clunky buttons? Just like the telly, you had to really push down on them to make the cassette work. Play me Joy Division albums or Never Mind the Bollocks. Oh, man, it was a brilliant thing. But telly was the same. So as I say, I had a remote. It was a fishing rod that I got off John, the TV man. He was a lovely fella. I don't know where he is now. He used to work at the Belgrade, as I say. But that was kind of innocent days, wasn't it? And then I remember the first video recorders coming out. That was the same. I had a remote control on the first video, but it was like on a cable that you had to plug in, so you could sit there. As long as you were close enough to the telly, you could fast forward and back it. Again, that was at university. It wasn't mine, the video. I think that was Nigel, my flatmate. I remember watching us, what was that guy's name? Brian Hanrahan, when we went into the Falklands. And he said on the boat, he said, I counted the jets out and I counted them in, yeah? When we really shoved it up. What was that headline in the Sun? Up yours. Not Delors, was it? Who was the Gautieri? It was one of Kelvin Mackenzie's headlines. So I'm digressing here. Anyway, they were simpler times, weren't they? But that's not where we're at now. Everything seems to have built-in obsolescence. So when I was watching that night sleeper programme, I was thinking, well, this couldn't happen. But it could. What if the Chinese are involved in a 100-year campaign? What if the Chinese are infiltrating? What if they're planting stuff in everything? Do you remember there was that telephone company where we nearly signed up to them to allow them to make these fantastic mobiles? And then suddenly our government said, no, they're involved in spying. But that's just one company. And I'm not having a go at the whole of China here, by the way. But I'm just asking, the way they've developed, and because they are a dictatorship, perhaps they've got a more malleable population. Are we sowing, or have we already done it? This is the depressing thing. Have we already sown the seeds of our own destruction? In a way, COVID proved this. We couldn't even manufacture, could we, despite the best efforts of the cabinet to get their mates millions and trillions of pounds, we couldn't manufacture the gear here, the masks, the PPE. It all came in from where? China. And now Boris yesterday saying he thinks that COVID started in a lab. Well, welcome to the club. I mean, a lot of people didn't like my COVID views because I believed in the vaccination. And I still do, by the way. I definitely believed in it at the beginning. But it was obvious this was man-made. I think we've never been told the truth about this. And there was all these stories about the Americans funding the laboratory, about them closing down one in Washington, about they had the one in China. I think it was probably scientists. And it leaked. I never bought into this idea it was bats or it was the wet fish market. If it was the wet fish market, I used to go to the wet fish market in Coventry every Thursday and every Friday. I'd have been dead. It just didn't add up to me. But we live in this globalised world where everybody, what did Thatcher used to say? Everybody knows the price of everything but the value of nothing. I don't know if it was Thatcher or that was somebody criticising Thatcher. But we just want things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, don't we? It's like when we look at a website. Careful, Gaunty. If it doesn't load immediately, we click off, don't we? And go and find another website to look at. Are you with me? Or are you against me? If you think I'm talking rubbish, send me an email, john@johngaunt.com. Or feel free to get on Twitter or get on Facebook. And if you like what I do, why don't you tell all your mates about it and share the links to it? This is a very different podcast today, because what I'm trying to do is just talk about things that are beginning to concern me. It doesn't always have to be about politics in Britain. And let's face it, it's a clown show. If you see that Conservative conference, they've got nothing to talk about. Even Rishi's only stayed about 2 hours. And you've got all those idiots who want them to become leader of the dead party. I can't see it myself. That Robert Jenrick, don't you just want to get him and smack him across the chops? Yeah? And Kemi, what's she on? She's on chemicals, some of the rubbish she's been coming out. But I think the threat is out there. I think it's about China. I think it's about how we've sold our manufacturing. We don't make anything in this country. I know we make, technically now, more cars than we ever did, even in the 70s. But none of the companies are what you can call British, aren't they? And this isn't me saying I want a Union Jack on everything. I'm not being old gammon on you. I just think, how have we got ourselves in this state? So when COVID happened, we had to get the PPE from abroad. From where? China. What has happened to us? What has happened to this great country? I mean, Scotland in particular, look at all the inventors who came from Scotland. Look at what we invented. Look at what we gave the world. And look at us now. We're diminished. And maybe that's why we've got the politicians we deserve. I don't know. And then, so you think to yourself, well, if we're using all these Chinese stuff in little things like telephones, are they also providing the means of transmission, the masts? Are they all Chinese owned? Like our power companies, they're all owned, aren't they? Now, by I think German mostly and French, but who owns their companies? Is China in the background there? Could somebody just flick the switch and bugger up this country completely? Have I gone a bit David Icke on you? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Surely it's okay to go on and on about we must protect our borders and the small boats, but who's more of a threat to you? A few guys in a rubber dinghy trying to get across the channel? Or do you think it could be the state? And I'm not talking about our government. I'm talking about the government that's in the background somewhere. Who's controlling all this? And if illegal immigration is so bad, why didn't the Tories, when they were in power, just employ loads of lawyers to process these people? There must be a way that this 94,000 backlog can be processed, and they can either stay or they can go. But I said to you ages and ages ago, they use it like a bogeyman. But I don't think they're the threat. I don't think they're the threat, really. Yes, of course, there's some horrid people getting in amongst other people who are just coming to better themselves, like my dad moved from Hull to Coventry. I've got mates whose mum and dad moved from Jamaica or Barbados or India to make something of themselves. We don't want to get rid of those sorts of people, do we? But somehow, and it's not just the Tories, because Labour are doing it now as well, we're meant to believe that this is the biggest threat to us. I don't think it is. I think it's probably because the biggest threat now is we're in bed and in debt to the Chinese. Why are we getting rid of coal and fossil fuels and saying we're going to go all electric with our cars by 2030 when it's clear the Chinese have got no desire to do that? In fact, they're doing quite the opposite. Who's put all the technology into our water plants? Let's face it, our water is filthy and full of shit anyway, isn't it? But is there a bigger problem? Have we already allowed foreign governments, I'm talking governments here, not necessarily firms, to own that infrastructure as well? So when we talk about protecting our borders, protecting our great country, our way of life, is it too little, too late? And that's before I go on to AI. Who's the leading experts in that? The Chinese. And the Chinese universities, or professors from China working in our universities. Who's going to control that? There's going to be no jobs for the working class. I was listening to somebody the other day saying, oh, well, the only job that'll be okay, definitely protected, will be podcasters. Because already they're using AI voices. GB News is doing this. They've sampled, or however they do it, the newsreader, so then they can make the newsreader on the bulletins on their radio, this has been in the papers, created by AI. There's no human involved. Well, if you're introducing pop records and just being a DJ, why can't they just use an AI voice for that? Let's face it, some of them sound like fucking robots anyway. Talk radio might be slightly different. Although, did you hear Bill Gates? Boo, his pantomime villain. But Bill Gates has bought 200 radio stations in America. You got to ask the question, why? Because radio is dead. Traditional linear radio, like, oh, I've got to listen to Chris Evans at 10, although he's a genius, or I've got to listen to, what's his name, Mike Graham, yeah? He's useless, but I've got to listen to him to get my daily dose of politics. Well, that's at 11 o'clock or whatever time he's on. That's all over. Linear podcasting's gone. Linear broadcasting is over. Do you ever watch anything live on the telly? It's the same with the telly, apart from sport. You don't have to watch anything live. I watch EastEnders most nights with my mother-in-law. We don't worry that we're going to definitely be finished tea by 7:30. We just watch it afterwards. You don't even have to watch it, record it. You can just watch it on the iPlayer whenever you fancy, like that Night Sleeper. You can just watch it when you want to watch it. So why has Bill Gates bought 200 radio stations, local radio stations, across the United States of America? He's a clever man. He wouldn't be buying something to lose money, would he? I don't know why he's done it. Is it so that when the next pandemic comes, they can control the population? Because even though I was in favour of vaccination, and I was in favour at first about the masks and in favour of the distancing, I can see now some of that was rubbish, but we all got persuaded, myself included. So are they preparing us for what might come down the line next? What if there suddenly is power cuts and they tell you there's a malign influence? They wouldn't necessarily say China. It doesn't have to be China. It could be anybody. And that you've got to stay at home. You've got to do this. We'd comply, wouldn't we? I know I'm beginning to sound like David Icke, and I apologise. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? It's like cashless society. I've been banging on, haven't I, recently, about these self-service tools in supermarkets. I'm against them. And now it's gone even further. There's now whole supermarkets where you can't pay by cash. I'll give you another example. Pret. I know the one in Oxford, at Oxford train station. Don't believe me? Go and ask for a cappuccino, or ask for a batch, we call them batches in Coventry, a sandwich, and then try and get out a 20, try and pay with a 20 quid note or a 10 quid note. You'll need about a 10 quidder if you're having a sandwich and a coffee. You need a second fucking mortgage. But anyway, you try and do it. They'll say, no, we don't take cash. They only take cards. Go across the foyer to Marks and Spencer's that's there. They've got little Marks and Spencer's. Same thing. Only one till takes cash. There's no cashiers in the Marks and Spencer's. It's all these automatic tills. It's the same at Coventry Rails. Even Coventry. Backward-looking Coventry. Even in Coventry. You can't... Well, you can pay by cash, but there's only one till that takes cash. The rest all take cards. But there isn't an assistant behind a till. Why do they want to do that? Well, it's obvious why they want to do it. Because it's cheaper for them, but also they can keep a track on what you're spending. That worries me. Oh, I'm definitely going into David Icke territory here. Let me tell you something else. Did you see China last night? There's a load of stuff on the news. Unbelievable. They had some sort of festival. You know what the Chinese are like. They're brilliant with fireworks. But they ain't using fireworks anymore. They're using drones. And they did a display yesterday or the day before. It was on the internet. You can check it out myself. They had 10,000 drones in the sky in one place, in a light show. 10,000 of them. And it was brilliant. I thought about this about 10 months ago. I thought, or 12 months ago, I thought, well, why do we use fireworks anymore? It'd be better to use drones. And you've seen it at pop concerts now, yeah? They can use drones to spell out names and do pictures. It's fabulous technology. But, of course, that's how warfare's going to be now, isn't it? They send in drones. They send them in at the moment to do surveillance, but they can send them in also to bomb and kill and maim people. And they can be really targeted. I know there's the whole discussion about collateral damage. But that's the way war's going to go. What if suddenly 10,000 drones weren't doing a nice, pretty display on firework night, but were actually raining down on us? It's like the war of the worlds. The chances of anything coming from China instead of Mars is 1,000,000 to 1, they said. But still they come. Was it Jeff Wayne? I was working in Boots when that came out. God, that sold like... That tells you how long ago it was. It was when Boots in Coventry had a record department. Yeah? That record, was it Jeff Wayne? War of the Worlds, it was called. Brilliant album if you like that kind of pump rock. But why couldn't that happen? Why couldn't suddenly all this technology turn against us? And I don't mean in a sci-fi way. I mean a malign government or a terrorist organisation. Like in Night Sleeper. They get into it and they can suddenly turn it all against us. Poison our water. You don't need to poison our water supply, do you? You just need to be able to turn it off. Or stop the filtration. Well, Thames Water have done that effectively anyway. They just pump as much shit as they want into our rivers. Got to admire Fergal Sharkey, haven't you, out the undertones, what he's doing. Unbelievable. But this has just got me thinking, how have we got ourselves into this state? And it's the same in America, you know. Well, anywhere. I mean, I go to my mate who lives in Tenerife, Paul. There's a load of these Chinese supermarkets. I've not got anything against individual Chinese people. It's like Russia. As you know, I work for Sputnik and I worked for Russia Today, and I've been to Russia. As I say, I don't think the Russian people eat their babies. Yeah? But I just think, nor do the Chinese people. But what about their governments? Or what about somebody who's above their governments? And then we worry about nuclear war. I don't think it's going to be a nuclear war that's going to kill us all. I think it's going to be this sort of technology, or people who've given us all this technology who then suddenly decide, nah, I'm going to switch that off. I'm going to teach you a lesson. Here you are, Britain, have a bit of this, no electricity. So we're going to get all our cars, right, running on electric, and then suddenly we haven't got enough electricity to power them up. I think this has already happened in California. People were told not to charge their cars. It was putting too much, effort, too much strain on the grid, the electric grid system. Who's coming out with all this? Don't we just need to slow it down a bit? Meanwhile, our government tell us to worry about guys coming across the channel, which admittedly we need to sort out, but they want us to worry about that. Or the latest, they come out with some chicken shit law, like literally with chickens. If you want to have a chicken, I think this must be a parody, but it's all over Twitter at the moment. If you own a chicken or a duck, you've now got to have a form. You've got to fill out a form in triplicate, probably on email, to have permission to have a chicken. My nana used to have pigs in her back garden, just lived in a suburban street and all. And we're not talking back in the 60s. I'm talking about the late 70s, 79, 80. And we should chuck all the scraps to the pigs, and then she'd get a bloke down the road who had a shed, and he'd slaughter the bastard. And then we'd eat it, she'd salt it up. That's what happened. But now if you've got a chicken or a duck, you're going to have to fill out, I think so. And then, it's just mad, isn't it? What's going on at the moment is mad. As I often say, it's a mad, mad world, my masters. And I don't know what the answer is. And none of what I've said is to say China is this terrible country. Well, it is. It's a dictatorship. But they're going to do this, they're going to do that. But I just think on the day when these two major industries are finishing forever today, steel manufacturing and indeed fueled by coal, and indeed those big towers, those big cooling towers. You see them in Nottinghamshire, don't you? When you're going up the motorway, they're going to go. They'll demolish them. Old Fred will be spinning in his grave. What's his name? The scaffolder. Do you remember him? Not the scaffolder, the chimney man. You know what I'm talking about. I just don't think where we're getting to. I don't know whether I'm calling for a return to the days of big plastic knobs on our electrical equipment. I don't know what I'm calling for. I'm just perhaps saying, stop the world, I want to get off. What a beautiful musical that was. That was a fantastic musical in the 70s and 80s. Anthony Newley, yeah? Danny Baker's favourite kind of cabaret artist, he was. But I just don't know where we're getting to, and this over-reliance on cheap goods is a good thing. I think it's pretty damn terrifying. I'd love to get your views and your contributions on this, right? Feel free. Why don't you just give us a call, I was going to say. I'm jumping ahead there. I am trying to develop it, but we'll see whether we get to calls. But we're certainly going to get to video for these podcasts. Evidently, it's easier to sell advertising if you've got video. And I've got to have to get this so that we're making a bit of money out of it and so that we can develop it even further. Don't forget, though, we need your contributions. So don't forget to keep going to buymeacoffee.com. David McGeechee, what a hero. I'm going to read out the names in a moment. But this is a letter, an email. This is from Angie. She bought me 3 coffees the other day. And then she had a pop at me. But it's a really intelligent pop. Have a listen to this. Hi, John. I've listened to your last couple of podcasts. I find them very interesting. Thank you. Keep the in-depth information coming. We look forward to hearing more, especially about Starmer and any other further revelations regarding his love of freebies. We'd all like to hear more, but at the moment he's gone missing. It's like, where's Wally, isn't it? And we're not allowed to talk about it. That's Britain. That's the freedom of the press, Angie. But thank you for your comments. Then she goes on to say, what I can't agree with you about is your views on Trump. I think Trump is a very dangerous man for America, and if elected as president in November, would be a dangerous man for the world at large. I am surprised at you supporting someone with the view that women aren't allowed to own their own bodies. Women aren't allowed to have an abortion unless they can prove rape or incest. Then she goes on to talk about the immigrants. I'll come on to that in a minute. Let's just answer that first point there. He is pro-life, isn't he? He is. And he's anti-choice in a way. I can't argue with that. And I must admit, I used to hold those views as well. I don't really like the way that abortion in our country has become abortion on demand. It was never meant to be that. When David Steele, the ex-Lib Dem leader, set up the abortion bill in 1967, Angie, the idea was it was meant to be a last resort. I think you'd have to agree with me that even in our country now, it's on demand. And I would never criticise a woman for choosing to have an abortion. I think years ago I would. I think I'm more mature than that now, of course. And but when you see women have an abortion 2 or 3 times, when there's contraception left, right and centre, there's the morning after pill. Although some people, mad Catholics particularly, even think the morning after pill is terrible. Of course it isn't, but that's what they think. So my views, I think, have mellowed over the years. And in the end, a woman has got to have the right to choose. I agree with you. And so I think Trump's a bit extreme, and I think J.D. Vance is on that. But I think that'll be mellowed out, hopefully, by Kennedy. I think Kennedy's a great addition. And certainly, I think if something was to happen to Trump, and let's face it, they're doing their best to try and kill him at the moment, I think if he gets elected, well, he will get elected, Angie, so you may as well give up on that. He's getting elected. When he becomes the next president, if he was to get assassinated, I think, even though I like J.D. Vance and I think his book is brilliant, I think Kennedy is the man to take over. But, God's sake, I don't want Trump to be assassinated. I found that really odd. You know, when I was talking to you about tribalism earlier today, and I've talked about it on another podcast as well, there are people who, I think it's 28 or 30% of Americans think it's a shame that Trump didn't get assassinated. How can people think like that? The man's a dad, a granddad, a husband to people. Lots of people love him to bits. You might not like him, but you don't want him assassinated, do you? We can't have politics governed by the gun. Then we're as bad as the terrorists we're trying to defeat. No. I'm against that. But going to abortion, I take on board what you're saying, but you're never going to get a political leader who's going to tick all your boxes, in my opinion. And when he said the thing about grabbing by the pussy, it was years ago, and it wasn't a different age. I think I said at the time, I'd have punched his lights out if he said that about my daughters. I don't like it. It's horrible, and men shouldn't talk like that. But the absolute reality is, men do talk like that, Angie. I'm ever so sorry to say, men sometimes, myself included, I've been guilty, are disgusting, horrible. We're animals. We shouldn't be. We're getting educated, and we need to continue to be educated. She then says, as with the blatant lie he spouted that immigrants eat their pet dogs and cats, I'm not sure that is a complete lie, but I take on board what you're saying. It was unnecessary, probably. And she says, I find it difficult to believe most of what he spouts. She then goes on to say, I'm also very much against your views on Israel and the way Netanyahu is conducting his fight against the Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, and now in the Lebanon. Well, he's not fighting the Palestinians. He's fighting Hezbollah and Hamas. That's what he would say. But I'll just take a step back. The thing with Trump is, if we elect him, he will be a hard, tough leader. There were no wars when Trump was in power before, but look at Obama's record. Look at Biden. Look at the miserable running away from Afghanistan and leaving the Taliban armed to the teeth. That would never have happened with Trump. I thought it was very funny when Zelensky said the other day, when he asked to meet Trump in New York, and Trump said yes, and then he said, but I must tell you, I consider Putin to be a friend. Did he say a friend, or certainly an ally, or something like that, he said. And Zelensky said, well, we want to be friends with you as well. And Trump just looked at him and said, it takes two to tango. He'll solve the Ukraine, Trump. Yes, it will be somewhere along the lines of, Putin, you can have that, what you've taken already, no more, not 1 inch. And Zelensky, if you want us to keep funding you, this is what we've got to do. And also, there's no appetite, I'm afraid, in America now for America to keep funding Ukraine. There isn't. Especially after the floods. Have you seen the floods? The devastation down in places like the Carolinas and Georgia and Florida. Appalachian. I've been to Apalachicola, is it called? I think, yeah. It's like stepping back in time. We stayed at a place called the Gibson Inn. I bet you that's been blown away. It was made of all wood. Me and Lisa went there. It was beautiful. It was like staying in the Waltons. But it was a 5-star restaurant hotel. Beautiful place. And of course we went all around the area when I went across Route 66 with John and my mates when we had Talk to Me Radio. Pensacola. What was that other place? Tallahassee, the capital of Florida. A lot of this has been really badly destroyed. And the Americans aren't going to take to Biden or Kamala Harris, although I noticed she hasn't even been to visit yet, although she's going to go, she says, because Trump said he's going to go, so she's in there. I'm going to. I just think the Americans won't, tax dollars now have got to go to protect America. It's a bit like in our country, isn't it? Why have we got so much foreign aid? I understand how foreign aid works, but we can't afford foreign aid when our pensioners are going to be freezing in their houses, but Stan will be wrapped up in his beautiful handmade suits. No. Right, let's go on to Gaza. He says the way he's conducting his fight against the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and now in the Lebanon. The attacks from Hezbollah would stop overnight, Angie says, and the Israeli hostages would be released if Netanyahu would agree to a ceasefire in Gaza. Well, for the hostages to be released, that's Hamas. You're getting your two terrorist organisations mixed up there, but I take your point. Someone has to make the first move, but we also have to remember the first move was actually made by Hamas. That dreadful slaughter I looked at that girl who was in the back of that car and she'd been raped, and then they were spitting on her and her legs were all contorted. I just saw my daughters. My daughters go to festivals and rock concerts. They go there just to have a good time on this kibbutz, and then that happens. Now, I'm not saying the Israelis haven't committed atrocities in the past. They have. They do react to somebody, David and Goliath, isn't it? They react to somebody almost with a pea shooter by coming in with the helicopter gunships. And of course, one has to urge restraint. And we all want a ceasefire. But I think, I've got to say, Angie, I think you're wrong. I don't think that if he agrees to a ceasefire in Gaza, Hezbollah in particular will jump into line. Hamas might a bit. I do agree with your next point. She says that Netanyahu, I can't say his name, he doesn't want peace. He knows as soon as there's a peace agreement, he's out of government and straight in the dock on corruption charges in The Hague, and maybe even into The Hague for war crimes and genocide in Gaza. We shouldn't use the word genocide. It's not genocide. But you're right, he would lose his political power. He's not that popular in Israel at the moment. I agree with you. She then says Israel have become an out-of-control rogue state. They feel they're above the law, literally getting away with murder. They've pushed the boundaries beyond any other Western country in laws of engagement with the assassinations and multiple killings of innocent civilians. I'm not sure that's strictly true either. I think when they targeted Hezbollah, was it Hezbollah? Yeah, Hezbollah, don't get them mixed up, and blew their balls off and blew their fingers off, there wasn't much collateral damage. In terms of an act of retribution, the pagers and the walkie-talkies blowing up was just brilliant. I know people have been injured and hurt, but if they're terrorist scum, I don't give a shit, Angie. I literally don't give a shit. And when they took out their leader, then their new leader, over the last couple of days, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And if that brings the rest of Hezbollah into line, good. Doesn't mean there can't be a peace negotiation after that. As for Hamas, well, I kind of say the same thing. But we do need a two-state solution. I agree with all of this. Although I would say Israel take a lot of crap off these people. Well, where are we up to now? You speak of the corruption in our government with regards to being in bed with the media. In Israel, they allow no media or scrutiny whatsoever. Where else does that happen? Russia, China, North Korea. I rest my case. Well, again, you're kind of half right, Angie. Undoubtedly, they have banned press in Gaza, so we have to now rely on Hamas and what they say about how many people have died. Israel should allow the press and independent journalists into Gaza. I agree with you. I agree with that. You see, so this is where I'm coming from. We've got to get out of tribalism and we've got to try and get into how do we find a solution. I saw a diplomat, a very old diplomat from England, who was on Laura Kunsberg's show yesterday. And I'd like to have listened or talked. I'd love to interview the guy. I was interested in what he said about the art of negotiation, because that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a way of getting to a solution. We all basically know what that solution should be, which is a two-state arrangement. But I think too often Israel is painted just as the big bad enemy. And likewise, well, no, Hamas and Hezbollah, sorry, they are terrorists. I don't think Palestinians are, and I think an awful lot of Palestinians have died. And for that, and when you see the pictures of the young kids, no human being, no father could ever say that's right. It's not. But it's so complicated, isn't it? But I tell you what, Andrew, thank you for your email. And I hope I've answered it in a fair and honest way. And I've said what I think. I'm not even saying I'm completely right, because I'm not sure I am. I'm just saying what my feelings are on it. But I do think if we got Trump, warts and all, and he's certainly not the man he was for best part of 7 years now, 8 years, when he got elected. But he did bring peace. He did bring strength. And I think the country needs that. Not the country. I think the globe needs it. I think the crying shame is Out of 365 million people, the best they could come up with was Biden and Trump. And now replacing Biden with her, I'm sorry, she doesn't inspire confidence whatsoever. I've yet to hear her set out a well thought out policy on anything. It's just word salad. Is that the term? Word salad? Is that the modern term? She just spouts bullshit and platitudes. Then she laughs like a hyena and claps her hands. I just find it odd. And you know what? I think a woman president would be a good thing for America. I wish there was a strong female prospect. I do think women, on the whole, are much more sensible than us men. As I'll refer you back to my point previously. Men are twits. Twats even. They are. We all get into that. Mine's bigger than yours. It happens all the time. It happens in football. It happens in politics. I think women often can offer an alternative view, and a view that men will listen to. So I've got nothing against the idea of a woman becoming the President of the United States. Still got something to talk about. My goodness me, we've done an hour and 5 minutes. I do apologise. But if you'd like to pay for it and donate and help us out, feel free. David McGeechee, 50 quid. He gave me 10 coffees yesterday. He holds the world record. I don't think that will last long, David. There's a few old fans who will want to chance that. Ian Purvis, he's donated again. Angie DeMarco, I've just been talking about, she put 3 coffers in. A couple of people, the same person actually, came anonymously. An awful lot of people are coming in anonymously. That's a sign of the times, isn't it? People scared of the social media stormtroopers. Damien King, Steve Thompson, Stuart Hinton put 15 in. Thank you. Gary Miles, thank you very much indeed. What I want to say is, it doesn't matter whether you give a fiver or 50 quid. Whatever you give, thank you very much indeed. It's all going to help me develop these podcasts. And as you know, my ambition is to make them video again, because I think that's where the future is. Then I want to have guests into my studio and guests online like I did before, using that technology. And that's where we're heading to. I had a meeting about it yesterday. I've got another meeting next week. So that's where I'm trying to get to. But what I had to do first was get off the dole, which, with a bit of freelance work and through your donations, to be honest, I'm managing to happen. I've now got to a point where I'm earning about the same amount as I could get on the dole, which is not a lot of money. It's about 180 quid a fortnight, isn't it? So, but if you can help me out, feel free. Phil Rogers, Leslie Clark, 3 coffees, thank you. Another anonymous one. By the way, I don't mind you being anonymous. I understand why. And when you go on, if you're wondering how this works, you just click the link on my Twitter or on Facebook. It takes you straight to it. buymeacoffee.com/John Gaunt. And you don't have to type that in. Just click on it. There it is. And then it asks you if you want to be anonymous or not. It's 2 clicks and you can just press the button for what you want to donate. Meaty Cleaver. That's another anonymous one. Thank you. Paul Malloy, Mark Ingram, John Robinson. Another anonymous. John Woolsby. Big old fan of mine. Thank you, John. Essex Steve. Thank you, Steve. Martin Hudson. 5 coffees, 25 quid. Thank you so much. Warren Howard, Paul Fasackley, I still love your name. Andy George, he's been in a few times. Bev Sorby, Gary Munnery, Jim Gwillem, David Brook, Adam Thomas. Thank you very much indeed. Have all bought me coffees. And you might think, well, I've donated once. Well, yeah, but we've been going a month or so now. So if you can afford another 5, would you mind? Thanks. Valentine Smith, Pat McShay, James Watt, Steve T, Fred Dicker, Paul Shinnock, Ian Purvis again, Angie DeMarco again. Thank you very much indeed. I'll read some more out in a moment. I just did want to remind you, the filthy pervert, sue me if you want. Philip Schofield's on the telly tonight. I see Eamon, my old pal, had a right pop at him this morning on GB News. This guy is back on the telly. Oh, I'm the victim. My whole career's finished. Tough shit. Tough shit. I've worked with you as well. I know what you are. You're dead behind the eyes. You're not a pleasant person. You deserve everything you've got. And now sending your daughter in to bat for you. Oh, you disgust me, Philip. You disgust me. I won't be watching it, I don't think. I might record it and then just fast forward it just so I get the general gist. But it's going to be both basically a woe is me documentary, isn't it? Jim Gwillem, Lee Pothcary, Two more anonymous ones. Thank you. Andrew, Brian Schaefer out on the Gold Coast in Australia. Got a lot of listeners in Australia. Steve Witcher, Mark Peaty, David Groves, nearly there. Thank you very much. Leslie Clark again. Richard Crouch, Lester Wild again. Vince, a couple of anonymous ones putting in a $5. Thank you. Dean out in Adelaide. Told you a lot of people in Australia. Jake Morton Brown, one of my oldest listeners. Great lad. Kevin Cunning, another one who's anonymous. Thank you. Window Cleaner Simon, sorry. Lord Wayne Best from Nailcut Hall. Thank you, mate. Burt Routledge, Essex Steve, John Godley, Boise, Mark Randall, good friend of mine. He put 3 in. Thank you, Mark. He's a great singer and actor. Ian Rice. Thank you, Ian. Big old fan of mine as well. Put a $5 in. Ben the Ram, Matthew Stratford, Elaine Izzo. She's been with me for ages. Don't tell the wife. Leslie Clark's a joke. Leslie Clark, Tony Pycroft, Alan Fox, Kevin Cunning again, John Pete, Meaty Cleaver again. Thank you, Meaty Cleaver. Another one whose name I can't mention. Mocha Lounge, my favourite cafe. If you're ever in Coventry, make sure you go. Mocha Lounge, brilliant coffee. Andy George, Mark Gleaves, Gary Munnery, Luca, Ziggy Spicer Gibbs, David Griffin, Grant the Cabbie, been a fan of mine for ages. And then, of course, Wojtek Krajewski, one of my longest fans. He put in 5 coffees. He was my first person this time round. Thank you very much indeed, Wojtek. And thank you to everybody who is donating. And if you wish to donate, just go to buymeacoffee.com/John Gaunt, and you can put anything in from 1 coffee through to 10 coffees. You can do 100 coffees if you want. Do as many as you want. Thank you very much indeed. And I am pretty pleased with myself that, I'm getting this off the ground again. My confidence was shot to bits, but I've been supported by my wife, my children, and of course my mates. People like Dave, one of my oldest mates. We've known each other years. Perry, I've known him since I was 4 years old. That's how far we go back. And of course Phil as well, who used to do all my technology for me. So they've all been supporting me. And then I've got a group of mates who I drink with on a Friday, and they're supportive as well. It's just wonderful when people say, shit, John, you're being honest, you've been in the shit, we're going to help you. Thank you for that. And of course, I've got to say a big thank you to Martin and to Kieran and David, who I met a couple of weeks ago. Some very, very old friends of mine who are involved in other projects with me. Thank you for your help as well. We're getting there. We are getting there. I wasn't sure whether I'd pull it off, but it looks like I am. But it's down to you as well. I've now got the hiccups. So thank you very, very much indeed. We'll talk again very soon. This big news about Starmer will break in the next day or two, and then we'll have a right good debate about that. But I can't say much more. I've said too much already. Okay, so thank you very, very much indeed. And come back to me on this thing about, tell me if I've gone all David Icke conspiratorial about the China thing and technology, and also whether we need all the technology. I guess that's the other thing I'm kind of saying. I just wonder whether we're going to become hostage to fortune. And if you've not watched that Night Sleeper, have a look at it, because that kind of gives the temper of what I've been trying to say. Temper? That's not the right word. I'm useless. I don't know how I've ever made a living by using my gob. I do apologise. Right, that's it. 1 hour, 13 minutes and 40 seconds. If that ain't worth a cup of coffee, I don't know what is. Until we meet again, if you've got kids, give them a kiss, give them a hug. Hey, hey, hey! Don't forget to tell them you love them. See you later. Thanks. Bye.